to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Jarrod Lopiccolo on the line. Jarrod, how are you today?
I'm doing great, and great job on pronouncing the last name. That I'll answer to many different kinds, but yeah, I'm doing great. How about you?
I'm doing really good. And yesterday I interviewed somebody from Germany, and the name, the way you spell it, you would look at it, but that's not how you pronounce it. So I'm like, and I looked, I'm like, it wasn't a case where I usually, I look at the name, I'm like, I think I know how to pronounce that. But with hers, I'm like, I think this is a trap. Let me research this, and I knew, she was, from Germany, so it's like, okay, I know if it looks, like a word that you would say in English, it's like it's gonna be pronounced different there. So she was like, "How did you know that?" It's like,
Yeah.
I looked it up, but that's no, yours, I was like, I'm pretty sure this is it. So,
Good on
re
you.
thank you very much. I appreciate you, and, why don't you share a little bit about yourself, and then we'll jump into the conversation.
Yeah, so my name's Jarrod Lopiccolo. I'm a CEO and co-founder of a creative digital performance agency. My wife and I founded the agency 22 years ago. I was really on a path and set to be one of the youngest architects in the United States. And I really fell in love with this sort of virtual architecture, the idea of building the internet and connecting, brands and people together. And at the time, my wife, she was a copywriter, and she was working for a large agency out of Las Vegas called On Our Partners, and really was on that campaign. What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. And that was one of her bigger ones. And we just decided, you know what, let's move out of like what we went to school for, or things like that. Let's help build the internet, sort of one website at a time, one connection of a brand to a customer at a time. And yeah, now we're 22 years in the business. We've got 3 offices, one in Las Vegas, one in Reno, Tahoe. Both of those are in Nevada, and then the other one's in the United Kingdom, in a town called Bristol, just a few hours outside of London. And so, yeah, all in all, we're doing really good. We're still here. We're still having fun. So that's a good thing.
Oh, yeah, and over the last 2 decades, wow, you have seen all kinds of
Yes.
changes when it comes to digital marketing because, back then, 'cause I don't think Facebook and those guys showed up till
No.
well, they were around 2000, I think. Because I remember, a colleague of mine, I was working in Chicago, and they had a Friendster account, for those of us that remember that, and then Facebook came up, and everybody's like, the Friendster is gonna last. I don't think this Facebook's gonna stick around." Yeah, don't follow stock advice from that person, huh? Uh, but needless to say, there has been so many innovations, and even today, as AI tends
Yeah.
to take over the dialogue of things, it's really interesting to see all these moving parts. So, somebody that you've seen, fads come and go, and new tools come and
Yeah.
they go. What's some of the observations you're seeing right now when it comes to, again, this is the attention business. It's to create a story to connect with people so they, pay attention to it and look into it. But I'd love to see your
That's right. Yeah, well, to your point, we have seen so much change from, yeah, the BlackBerry phones, or the Trios, that were like the sort of standard phones before smartphones. And we got to see like the whole rise of, the app world into phones, to custom gateway pages to Facebook and Instagrams and all this. It's just an incredible amount of change. And I would say that it's one of the reasons why we have the mantra or the strap line that we do, which is let's be better every day. But it's an invitation not only for ourselves, but our team members and our clients, that we are operating on about a 30% learning curve because of the amount of changes that happen every single year. And part of that is why we're still here, right? That resilience of being able to adapt and adjust to the market. But one thing that has been 100% constant throughout all the innovations, throughout all the technologies that come and go, is what people want, which is a connection with someone else or a brand. And I think the more that we are, especially moving into this day and age where we're starting to lose some of our trust with institutions and things like that, more than ever, an individual wants to have a relationship even deeper with a brand, and that brand should have the values or the same value systems that they have, and and whatnot. And I think that that's what we've seen throughout the entire 22 years, is that that has not changed. People want to have a relationship with either another person or a brand or a product or a service or an experience or a destination. And that hasn't changed. So we have to continue to always keep that top of mind, that, and not only do they want a relationship, they actually want to have an emotional relationship with them. And that ultimately is what tips them over to make purchases and continue to have that sort of connection with those brands.
Well, goes back to what you mentioned a moment ago about your wife and for we'll pick on your wife for a second. The copywriting side of things, that's storytelling. It's like connecting the information that you want to relay to the reader or the
Yes.
viewer, depending on what medium you're using, in a way that they can see themselves in the picture or can feel an emotion about what
Yes.
you're saying, whether it's a news story about something tragic that happens or it's a good news story about this is what somebody did to help this person out in a time of need. Your background, architecture,
Yeah.
that is design, vision, ideas, creativity, and that in the history of architecture continues to evolve even to this day. Yes,
Yeah.
the tools you would use might have changed a little bit, but the
Yep.
foundation is still the same, and pardon the pun there with the foundation joke, but I didn't mean it that way, but it kind of came out that way. It does work. But knowing architects like I do, you explain, this is what I'd like to see.
Yeah.
And they have to basically use their internal translator to translate our limited, and not saying that we're limited, but if we're not architects, we say, well, I want to have this and this and this. I want to have this type of skylight or this, or office building, I want this and this. And you have to go, all right, how, knowing what is available now, what combination of things would work, would come up with a design, and people are blown away by it. Like, how did you do that? I just know how to.
Yeah.
The skills both of you had easily transferred into what you've been doing for the last 20 plus years. It's a natural segue, and I
Yes.
tell people this, and the reason why I'm bringing this up as far as a transferable skill component is when people are stuck in their jobs, quote unquote stuck, they feel like I don't have any other options. What else could I do? It's like, what skills do you have? Because all of those things are transferable to something else, and you can find that passion play for you and go, hey, I really want to do this. Then go do it.
Yep.
Go do it.
Well, and it just sparked an example. Like, many of the project managers that I know are actually incredibly good chefs. And it makes sense because if you think about putting together a meal, it's a concert, right? You have to look at what item is going to take the longest to cook. And then everything's based off of that. So there's dependencies, right? And you think about the same thing with project management, whether you're building a building or you're actually building a website or a campaign or anything like that. There's all these individual dependencies. And so it's really fun to see, like, you can 100% cross pollinate your current talents into something totally adjacent that you might not realize, has those same sort of needs. And those skills are totally transferable. And that really was the case for me, in that I was, yeah, designing the world for humans to physically experience it, right? So when you think about designing a park, I had to understand the psychology that humans wanted to have a bench with a tree behind them so that they felt safe, right? And you start to think about all these different ways that a human will interact in a physical space, and you have to almost like predict how they will act in a user experience type space, a digital experience, type of space. And so if you think about the role of marketing and an advertisement, it is really to connect what people's interests are and wants and needs to the end product. And you have to understand, like, what's going to tip them, right? What are they are they giving you the buyer signals that they're interested in purchasing this? Are we getting different signals that says, no, they really need to be educated. So we need to put them in a lower, they're top of funnel at this moment in time. They're not ready to fully convert. So you really got to understand the human psychology. And I think that background of having architecture and just realizing that, each building has a different set of people that go into it, different uses. Same thing in the advertising world. Each time someone interacts with a brand, they have a different experience they want to have with it. But I will say with brands, and this is as we move into this future where more automation, more AI, I think brands actually have to invest more into brand awareness, even though I'm very much focused on conversion, bottom of funnel, that low hanging fruit. You really do need to open that upper funnel and give people this experience on brand, because that's where I think the future is, where people have a tighter, deeper relationship with companies. And so, yeah, so that's something we're working a lot with our clients on, is like, how do we shift some of that media revenue to be a little bit more brand focused? And then therefore we're opening up, creating more demand that we can ultimately capture after we go after that sort of first low hanging fruit opportunities.
And it's making brands more human and connection, where people feel connected. And real quick, you had mentioned like the architect and designing a park. There's a park not too far from me that from the main road, you see it, and it goes down towards the lake, and it kind of slopes down a little bit. So if you're at the road, kind of where the parking is usually for the park, you look down and you see all the amenities of the park, the playground and, flower beds and all that kind of stuff. So you see it best way to describe it is like if you're looking at a painting and somebody painted this, and in the backdrop, you've got the lake and the water and, ducks and geese and things like that, and birds flying around and kids playing and families at the park and all that kind of stuff. So you look at it, you're like, wow, this is beautiful. Now, when it's rainy season, lower level for years was like a muddy cesspool, but then
Sounds like it could be, yeah.
the architectures, folks and all of that decided, okay, what do we do with this? So what they did is they, made the playground a little bit better. They installed, flooring that you'd see in a lot of things now that are super absorbent of water. So it suck up the water. So there'd still be some puddles here and there, but nowhere near the ancillary lake that was next to the lake kind of thing. So it basically, reduce the downtime quite thing. So that was just something that came to mind on that. But going back to what you said, again, I think making these organizations more human and connected, where people, feel connected to it. Now, I don't, I'll pick on Apple for a second. For a long time, and I think there still is, for a long time, being a user of Apple products, which I am, I'm not what you would call a fanboy where, 7 a.m. I'm in line to get the latest iPhone. You're not going to see me there because I don't need that as bragging rights that I got the first new iPhone, whatever.
Wasn't define you.
But some people love that, and it's like,
Yeah.
cool on them. I mean, I'm not judging. It's like that's just not me. But I find that while we still, really love the brand and do that, I don't sense, and maybe it's just from my own perspective, I don't sense the same, like, it just absolute excitement on anything that they do like we used to. And that's an interesting dynamic for them. They're obviously still doing quite well, multi, billion-dollar entity. But there's a brand, I don't want to call it a disconnect from my perspective, but there's something missing from my angle on it. And, you obviously as, an expert in this, you could probably say, well, this is what's missing from your point of view. But I've seen that where, brands that are beloved all of a sudden are more of a, that's like the uncle that comes to all the holiday parties. He's here. Yeah, we talked to him for a little bit, but he's just always there. We love him, but he's just there. So if your thoughts on
My thoughts on that actually, because I think it goes back to people. And, I'm a big believer in creating deep, meaningful connections with other humans and finding some sort of authentic connection, whether it's sports or camping or family or travel or whatever. And I feel that, you know, when you look at any sort of major sort of advancements that have happened, a lot of times you're following a leader, right? You're following a person. And you think of even Martin Luther King, he didn't say, I have a plan, right? He said, I have a dream. And that got people to align to that sort of dream. And I think with, you know, the loss of Steve Jobs and, this sort of, rise of, if you will, Tim Cook, I don't feel like he carries as much of that sort of like leadership that you want to just follow into battle. And then I think in addition to that, I think you're seeing this sort of diminishing returns. So every time they release a new iPhone, it's very micro, really small changes. Oh, the camera's got an extra couple, megapixels, or we added one more camera for a little bit of a wider angle. Those are all sort of like small, really micro optimizations. Like the park example that you brought up, the park is in place. Now it can optimize. And I think what's happened is they've optimized it over and over. They actually need something new to sort of recreate that human connection, or they need to bring in, say, a different leader that is really charismatic, that's going to drive people's interest and curiosity to learn, like, why are they doing what they're doing, how, and so I feel like a lot of brands hit that sort of plateau, right, where they start to hit that diminishing return on investment and interest with a human to that brand promise that they offer. So you're probably seeing some of that. And I am as well a Mac user now, but I'm actually a dual user because of the business. And we started out really doing a lot of building digital experiences. So I've got a Pixel Google phone. I've got a MacBook, and then I've got a Canon camera. And so I'm just kind of all over the place with the devices. But that also allows me to sort of like keep my knees bent, not be that fanboy, not go into something with a biased perspective, if you will. But yeah, I think we're all looking for some more hardware innovations. We're seeing a lot of like software innovations and tech innovations. Obviously, like AI and automation is just on the rise, and so that's driving a lot of people's interest. And that's probably also shifted some of our attention away from physical products to more of these digital advancements. And I think that's we're seeing a big shift there. And I think we'll also hit a plateau at some point. We're going to be like, okay, I'm hitting the fatigue of no more. I need no more AI software in AI. Just let it settle, let the dust settle, and let me sort of bed in a bit with it before you start throwing another thing. Because at some point we hit that fatigue.
Oh yeah, and I saw a phrase the other day, and I forget where I saw it, but they called it AI slop, which reminded me of the dot-com era, where there was so many dot-coms of this, that, and everything else, and a lot of it was good, and a lot of it, quite frankly, wasn't. And this too will sort out. I see a lot of these startups that are growing and doing great things, but in a couple of years they may not be around. I just and I share this stat probably way too much, but over half of the Fortune 500 companies from the year 2000 are gone. They don't exist anymore, and that's like mind-boggling. And even in San Diego, where I spend a bunch of time, there was a um, bio company, doing research, on medicines and things like that. They were rated as a $6 billion company, and 90 or a year and a half later, they were gone. And like, how do you go from 6 billion to nothing? I'm like, oh, well, Las Vegas. That's one place you could do it really quick. Won't take long. You think, yeah, I'm a billionaire. I'm great at cards. No, you are not. There's nobody great at cards unless they're doing something illegal. And believe there's why they're there. Yeah, the cameras are there, and they know who those players are, literally and figuratively. But again, it's like, how do you go that way? And I think a lot of it was, you know, organizations lose their way. They lose that storytelling. They get successful, and then they kind of, well, now that we're this, we can be this. It's like, that's not what got you here. I'm not saying don't advance and don't grow, but when you have a fan base or your customers, continue to serve them and innovate them and crush them, because we people can smell it a mile away. A lot of people underestimate how in tune and smart consumers are.
Oh
We noticed right away. It's like, product's just not as good. Yeah, and so that's something that you probably have seen quite a bit with the customers you've been with for a long time. You're like, wait a minute, this seems like a pretty hard shift for you. Are you sure you want to do that? So, if your thoughts on that.
Well, I think back to your point about the sort of all these, what I would call overvaluation of companies, right? That $6 billion. Like, did they really, when you finally develop business acumen, you realize, oh, 6 billion valuation, they probably only had 100 million in revenue. It was probably investor dollars, and they probably weren't monetizing. And so, that makes sense, because you think, yeah, 6 billion to just wipe out in a year or 2 years. It's not likely the case, but I will say that we are going to see a huge consolidation start to happen around these AI companies, because most of them aren't monetizing. They're just borrowing off of others. And, AMD just got, sold 10% of their company to OpenAI, and, a chip manufacturer. Is like, that hasn't fully come out all the way to say, oh yeah, that purchase, we're going to realize that investment. And so, so I do think we have an overabundance amount of overvaluations, and there will be a consolidation that happens, a lot more M&A, as they start to see their runway, really falling off. But maybe they have some sort of proprietary software or something's patented, or, so they'll be purchased for that, or even an acqui-hire, they'll purchase the team that's working for that company. But I think I want to touch on something you mentioned, though. I think outside of that, monetization, all those other things, I think companies do lose their vision. And I think that that's really like difficult because they chase the opportunity. And I feel like why we've been in business for 22 years is we set a vision that was allowing us to adopt no matter what technology was coming through. The name Noble is very much a core value, and we knew that we were going to need that as we navigated a world that was ever changing. And I feel that the most companies I see do lose their way is because they don't design their business based on their business strategy or their vision, and instead they sort of lead with what are the opportunities and how do we chase those. And eventually you wake up and you're effectively hollow as a company, and then at that point you've missed the demand, or you've chased something too long, and then you die on the vine.
Yeah, you gotta be noble, appropriate name for your organization, because that has served you well these first 22 years, and you got plenty of runway to go. So, Jarrod, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you and all this amazing work you're doing?
Well, thank you, Michael. And I enjoyed the conversation as well. I'm on LinkedIn. That's probably the number one place. So if you want to find me on LinkedIn, it's Jarrod, Jarrod. Last name's Lopiccolo, Lopiccolo. Thank you again, Michael, for pronouncing that right, but I'll answer to anything. And then, or you can go to our website, noblestudios.com. Take a look at our case studies, see some of the thought leadership, what we're putting out there. If that aligns, let's just connect. We don't have to be clients or anything. I just like to have great human to human connections. I always like to learn. I like to receive advice from others, and I'd like to give advice when people want it. So let's connect.
Awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So, Jarrod, thank you for being you and all this amazing work you're doing. Really appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate you.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.